Did you know that one of America's most terrifying serial killers wasn't a grown man lurking in the shadows, but a child barely old enough to tie his own shoes? Stick around to the end, because the most chilling detail about this case will leave you speechless. When we think of serial killers, we usually imagine hardened adults with a long history of violence. But what happens when evil is born, not made? What if the mind of a cold-blooded killer lies beneath the innocent smile of a child? In today's video, we dive into the disturbing true story of Jesse Pomeroy, America's youngest known serial killer. A case so twisted it shocked the 19th century world and still haunts forensic psychologists today. Jesse Harding Pomeroy was born in 1859 in Charlestown, Massachusetts. At first glance, his childhood seemed unremarkable. But beneath the surface, there were signs that something was seriously wrong. Jesse was born with a milky white eye, an oddity that made him the target of relentless bullying. But unlike most kids, Jesse didn't just absorb the abuse. He turned it into something darker, something violent. By the time Jesse was just 11 years old, he began showing alarming behavior. Local boys began to disappear for hours, only to return home bruised, bleeding, and terrified. When asked what happened, they whispered about a strange boy who lured them into secluded areas, stripped them, beat them with sticks, and left them bound in the cold. Police were baffled until one brave boy identified Jesse. In 1872, Jesse was arrested for brutally assaulting 7 young boys. Because of his age, the courts were lenient. He was sent to a reform school in Westboro with hopes that the boy could be rehabilitated. But Jesse had no interest in change. He spent 18 months there, pretending to be reformed, studying the Bible, and impressing his superiors. In truth, he was planning his next move. In February 1874, Jesse was released early for good behavior. Boston officials thought the boy had changed. They couldn't have been more wrong. Just a month later, 10-year-old Katie Curran disappeared. She'd gone to a local shop to buy notebooks and was never seen alive again. But she wasn't Jesse's only victim. On April 22, 1874, just weeks after Katie's disappearance, the mutilated body of 4-year-old Horace Millen was found on a beach in South Boston. His throat had been slit, his genitals mutilated, and his body stabbed repeatedly. The violence was so extreme that even hardened detectives wept at the scene. But what made it more disturbing was the realization that the killer had to be young, possibly a teenager. Suspicion quickly fell on Jesse. When police confronted him, they found his boots matched the bloody footprints at the crime scene. His knife bore stains of blood. And perhaps most disturbingly, he didn't deny the crime. Instead, Jesse confessed in chilling detail. He described luring Horace with promises of candy, taking him to the beach, and then committing the gruesome act without remorse. After Jesse's arrest, police began to investigate other missing persons. Then, a horrifying discovery was made. In the basement of Jesse's mother's dress shop, investigators found the decomposing body of Katie Curran stuffed into a makeshift grave beneath a pile of ashes. Her skull was crushed, and she had been hastily buried. Jesse had killed her too, before murdering Horace Millen. Jesse's trial in December 1874 captivated the entire nation. Newspapers labeled him the boy fiend and the monster in human form. The public demanded justice, but there was a major complication. Jesse was only 14 years old. Could a child really be sentenced to death? It sparked a fierce legal and moral debate across the country. Ultimately, Jesse was found guilty of first-degree murder. Although many pushed for the death penalty, Governor William Gaston hesitated to hang a 14-year-old. Instead, Jesse was sentenced to life in solitary confinement at the Massachusetts State Prison in Charlestown. He would spend the rest of his life in a tiny cell, away from all human contact. Jesse's years in prison were a bizarre chapter in criminal history. He spent decades in solitary confinement, longer than any other American inmate. Despite his conditions, Jesse remained intelligent, even manipulative. He wrote poetry, studied law, and repeatedly petitioned for his release. At one point, he claimed his innocence and even requested a new trial. But no one believed him. Experts have debated Jesse's mental state for over a century. Some claim he was a textbook sociopath incapable of empathy. Others argue he may have had paranoid schizophrenia or a form of childhood-onset psychopathy. In the 1870s, psychology was still a primitive science. Today, we might view Jesse through the lens of trauma, neurological damage, or even severe conduct disorder. But back then, he was simply called evil. Jesse Pomeroy died in 1932 at the age of 72 after spending 58 years in prison. He had become a ghostly figure, barely remembered, yet eternally infamous. His case changed how the American justice system treats young offenders. It sparked conversations about juvenile crime, mental health, and the limits of punishment. But perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: Jesse Pomeroy wasn't created by violence, he was born with it. What separates Jesse from other serial killers is not just his age, but his calculated brutality. He didn't kill in a fit of rage. His acts were premeditated, ritualistic, and almost surgical. He showed no remorse, no empathy. He wasn't influenced by drugs or peer pressure. He was a child, yet already a predator. His story forces us to ask, are some people simply born evil? In the 1870s, Jesse's crimes were so incomprehensible that many believed he was possessed. Others thought he was the product of poor parenting. Today, we might explore early intervention, therapy, or even genetic testing. But the horror of Jesse's actions still lingers. In a society that often romanticizes youth and innocence, his crimes remind us of how fragile and deceptive that innocence can be. Jesse's story isn't just about murder. It's about the justice system's struggle to understand young minds. It's about the thin line between mental illness and evil. And most of all, it's about how society chooses to deal with its darkest secrets. His case remains a haunting study in criminal psychology, a reminder that even children can carry terrifying darkness within them. Even after 58 years in solitary confinement, Jesse never apologized. Not once. In fact, his final words to a prison guard were reportedly, "I don't regret anything." A child who became a killer and died a monster. If the story gave you chills, hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime stories every week. What do you think? Was Jesse born evil or made by his environment? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes they sleep in it.